contest between the Jem'Hadar and the Klingons went late. To find out who won and why the Breen objected to having hot pies, listen to what we have to say from our own trusted sources on the lowdown on Lower Decks. Guten Morgen, bonjour. Welcome to everyone who are fans of the lowdown on Lower Decks. My name is Chris Pabon. I am but one of your two hosts of the show, and it's my extreme pleasure to introduce you to my co-host, Josh Pritchett. Josh?
Nok nech. Live long and prosper, everybody. Welcome to all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. This is Josh Pritchett. Chris, we had a hell of an episode this week, didn't we?
We did. I absolutely thought this was the season finale, and then I looked back and saw, no, it's just episode 9.
Yeah, one more to go, and I am okay. And I am, to quote Beckett Mariner, thank God they're not going to leave this on a cheesy cliffhanger. Or we hope they're not going to leave this on a cheesy cliffhanger. We only have one more episode to go. So yeah, we're going to go into next week, but we have a big episode to talk about this week, and I have to say, this has been in a season that gave us so much great writing. This one just was like blew me away. How good the writing was, the concept, the execution. It was, in my opinion, a flawless episode, and I was astonished with it. Chris, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I am now officially team dump Jennifer. I just want to make that clear.
Oh, okay.
And secondly, I thought this really delivered an emotional gut punch. And in hindsight, we sort of foreseen this coming when Ransom had her review, and he said everything from all the departments are glowing. Really good job. I mean, we sort of foreseen that they were setting us up for this, and it was painful.
It was hard to watch. It was amazingly written, but very hard to watch. And just for the record, I'm still team Beckett, Jennifer, and I think we can fix this, but because it's fiction. But without further ado, I think, Chris, should we now get into the good, the bad, and the Gorn?
I think we should. So
I think so.
we start out with Carol finally getting authorization for Operation Swingback, which will give importance to California style ships because, as we know, they do second contact. But what happens after second contact? So, Operation Swingback will be a way to give more importance to California style ships because they will be responsible for swinging back to planets to see, like, what happened after the last time we left them. And so, Admiral Buendia communicates that to commemorate this, they will be a reporter on board the Cerritos, which totally freaks Carol out. And so she tries to change who they are, which is perhaps like the first mistake they've made, because as we know from the perception of them from other California class starships, I mean, they're like the Enterprise of the California class. But, as soon as she hears, oh my God, the press. And so she starts to change things up, most notably canceling the piloting contest for the lower deckers and handpicking officers so that when the reporter does come on board, they only talk to them and not to anyone else. So she's trying to control the narrative here. And then they arrive at the planet, which is a planet that we saw before on The Next Generation. And Picard hasn't been there in, I think they say it's like 15 years. It's from the episode Symbiosis. And it's the planet Omar. And they beam down and they find that rather than a culture in need, this seems a culture very much that Ransom would admire. They seem rather fit. Joss, you want to take it from there?
Yes. So they beam down, and the first thing they see is a giant mural which shows the short history of the planet. First, the Enterprise leaving them without their drugs and without any way to get them, and then the 15 years or so that well, not 15 years, but the decade or so of cold turkey that everybody went through. I'm not making light of this, everybody. And then finally emerging at the other end, and they're feeling a lot better, and they've turned themselves into far more healthier, more centered kind of people, and that they're doing very well. And as Chris, you pointed out, Ransom is in big admiration of this. Meanwhile, the reporter from the Federation News Network, FNN, I will get into more of that later, is trying to get all these interviews, and Mariner feels kind of slighted that, hey, she has something she wants to say about all this. And Carol and Ransom are just trying to direct her away from Mariner and her friends, and just try to, kind of give a perception of the Cerritos as being this top of the line ship, no nonsense. We're pretty tight-lipped ship around here, folks. And meanwhile, so finally Mariner decides, screw it, I'm going to go talk to this woman myself. And she's waiting for the reporter outside her quarters. But Ransom is around the corner. Of course he is. He's always around a corner somewhere. And he hears that Mariner's going to be talking to the reporter. He panics and goes to warn Carol. And meanwhile, the Cerritos is headed towards the sister planet, which in the original episode of The Next Generation, where we first met these people, they were the drug dealers, and they want to see how they're doing. Okay, well, Mariner goes up to her duty shift on the bridge. Everybody is really looking at her, just perturbed, really angry. She's told to go in and see the captain. Carol rips her apart, tells her, I don't even know if I want you to be my daughter anymore, and basically sends her off to Starbase 80, which she's been threatened with for a while. And Chris, you want to take it from there?
So then we see Mariner do a walk of shame, and it's not the good type, through the corridors. Even her closest friends, they're sympathetic. They don't want her to leave, but they're kind of like, did you really do this? Because she has this perception of being loudmouthed and opinionated and always pointing out things that are wrong. And she goes to Jennifer for like the final, like, hey, at least will you believe me? And Jennifer's like, I can't believe you did this. And, tries to give her back the candle, which is like sort of symbiotic of like, okay, I'm giving you back this because the relationship is over. And Mariner's like, well, screw the candle. And she walks very sadly to the shuttlecraft that Starbase 80 center, and it's really like falling apart. I mean, I can't believe this thing can even fly. And the guys on it are just like, really, you're Starfleet? I mean, I guess you have to send the dredges somewhere, and that's where they're sending her. And then the ship takes off, and meanwhile, they continue the mission, and they go to visit Brecker, which is the planet that was the pushers of the drug. And they get down there, and it's never a good sign when the streets are empty. Papers are like swirling in the wind, like an old Clint Eastwood Western, and like no one is there. And Carol at first is like, yes, like something is totally messed up here. This is good. They're going to see how we're valued. And well, they find everything is empty when Ransom finds one inhabitant, and they get disintegrated by the Breen, because the Breen are there and they have taken over the planet, and they are there in force. And meanwhile, the ship that maybe could have alerted them that there was a Breen presence in orbit, the bridge and the view screen are filled up with the mom of the counselor, who's so proud of finally being left in charge. He says, like, I want my mom to see me doing this. So there's a firefight, and they get beamed up, and they're trying to get away, but now there's Breen all over. And as we remember, the Breen weaponry is pretty devastating for Federation starships. And so they're getting fired upon, and they're disabled, and it looks like the Breen are not destroying them because they want the ship. They want to analyze the Federation tech, and so they're about to be boarded. And Jax is where they put the board to board through the ship, and he's like, the Breen take their prisoners, so like fight or die. And it looks like this is the end. And then a ship pops out of basically nowhere, and it's a Federation ship. And Josh, you love Federation ships, so why don't you take us home?
Yes, thank you, Chris. So we are treated to the new Texas class Federation battle cruiser, which is uncrewed. In other words, it is essentially a drone vessel, a very well armed one that takes out the entire Breen task force and rescues the Cerritos. And so this is into portentous of things to come. So we will talk more about the Texas class in a little bit, but Carol then sits down and watches the full episode, and she is of the interview of the reporter did, and she is basically just raked over the coals, but it's not by Mariner. It is by some other lowly crew officers who
handpicked crew officers,
handpicked ones who basically, you're right, Chris, that obviously were discontented. There is a edited interview with Shax who clearly is having a moment where he's, how he can get sort of imbalanced with the Cardassian occupation of his home planet. And a lot of these handpicked crew people give the worst reviews about Carol. And then it cuts to an interview with Beckett. Beckett gives a glowing review of the Cerritos and her mom and says, I'm so lucky. I get to serve on a ship where my real family and my chosen family are here. And I feel like I have a great job here. And even though, she's known for complaining about the little stuff, the regulations, and everybody thinks she's just a complainer. No, she isn't. She's just, there are certain regulations just don't make sense. And she just is not afraid to call anybody out on it. And Carol realizes, oh my God, she wasn't the one who was trashing me. It's everybody. It's all these other people. I need to get her back here. I need to make this up to her. But when she finally gets a hold of Starbase 80 and we finally see what kind of a S-storm that is.
They have a Rolodex.
They have a Rolodex, and a Tiberian bat is just flying around wildly, and it's a nightmare. And apparently they just said, she just resigned. She turned in her uniform and her phaser and everything, and she just left. And we cut to a scene with Mariner on a starship with the with the person from the Archaeologist Guild, or the Free Archaeologist Guild, I should say, right? Sorry. And they're going off to dig up some mummies. And I believe that's where the episode ends, Chris. So, scene. And so, what do we think was the good of this episode?
Well, it's hard for me, Josh, because the good was actually everything bad. This is sort of like a Bizarro episode where I'm going to praise all the bad things that happened, right? I had called in the show a few episodes back, and I think I've been consistent in my message that something is going to happen and Becca is going to leave Starfleet. Now, I thought they were going to building up the relationship with Jennifer, that something bad was going to happen to Jennifer, and this is going to be the cause for her to leave. But oh no, it was actually much, much worse. And I thought this was going to happen in the final episode of the season. It's happened in the 9th. I still believe we're going to be left on a cliffhanger for the 10th episode. I don't think she's going to return like within one episode, but the good was the payoff for the buildup of everything we've had. And even in the previous episode, we sort of seen this coming when Ransom does her evaluation and says, listen, everything from all the departments just glowing. I mean, job well done. I mean, this set us up with this glowing review for the pull down, and it was just such a huge pull down. So well done. I mean, the writers built something up slowly, and then we had the payoff of like, oh my God, you did this, and her being forced not only just to transfer off the ship, but being forced to go to the dredge hole of the Federation, which appears to be Starbase 80.
Yeah, it was definitely it was a great episode. I mean, it went beyond just being a comedy episode. It was a family drama. And the thing is that, and I want to get more in this in the Gorn section here, but I just, how everybody has sort of built up this you know thing about Mariner the whole time, no matter what she does, and how often she's proven right, they still think, oh god, she is such a handful, she's such, there's all this drama with her, why can't she just do what she's told? Well, she's not a drone. She's never going to be. She has an advanced degree in
Xenobiology.
biology, right? Sorry. And she, the keeping her in doing little small stuff all the time is just going to drive her crazy. And I think that it was just such an incredibly well. And I mean, I think we should have kind of guessed that Starbase 80 was going to come up in this, because they've been sort of, talking about it all season, on and off, that, oh yeah, this is the worst place. Nobody wants to go there. It's a disaster. And okay, yeah, we finally get to see a little bit of it. And yeah, it is a total disaster. It's like, God, how are these people even still in Starfleet? Why is Starfleet even tolerating this thing? And you know, there's that. And then I think having the reporter there kind of covering it, because we never really saw I mean, we heard about the Federation News Service from Jake, because he used to write for them. That was the first time we ever really heard about, what is the free press like in the Federation. And then we hearing about this, Federation News Network, which I think is kind of like, all right, even though, yeah, it does stand for Federation News Network, but I think it's still a mismatch of Fox and CNN sort of thrown together. And the fact that this episode is named Trusted Sources, and there was a news program on CNN called Trusted Sources, kind of is a little bit telling here about that. So, just sort of thumbing our nose at it. I overall didn't have any complaints about it, but man, it could be a hard episode to watch, as Mariner is just raked over the coals for something that everybody thinks she did, but it turned out, oh no, she didn't do it. She wasn't the problem. These other people who think they know better are the ones who kind of screwed Carol over, you know.
Another part of the episode that I liked a lot was the unexpected return of the Breen.
Yeah.
It's been what, quarter of a century since we saw them on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, we have not seen them since the end of DS9.
I mean, everyone thinks of Klingons, Romulans, Andorians, but we tend to forget about the Breen as being like a power, and they surely are, because they are the ones who the founders turned to when the Cardassians during the Dominion Wars seemed like, yeah, these guys, they're failing us, but these guys weren't. And so the idea of them appearing again, and hopefully they're going to continue to use them further on, I like that. It was an underutilized race.
Yeah, I mean, we know so very little about them as a species, and because obviously they wear these big full body suits. You can't even see what they look like. There are little things that have been hinted at, like in the episode where Worf, Bashir, and Garrick were all in a Dominion prison camp. There was a Breen with them, and apparently Julian indicated that Breen don't have blood, or at least don't have what we might think of as blood. I mean, there's got to be something that works their cardiovascular system, but he doesn't know what it is. Nobody seems to.
They like the cold weather.
Yes, and they apparently like the cold. Although, if you will recall, apparently, what's his name? The Vorta, Jeffrey Combs' character, Wei Yun, he indicated to Damar that the Breen homeworld wasn't really actually that cold. And I think that they were thinking of building on something, possibly with, because initially Enterprise, and I'm sorry, I'm going to diverge here for just a second. Enterprise was originally considered to be the generation after Voyager, but then they decided to make it a prequel show. And so I think they were setting up that we were going to find out more about the Breen in the next Star Trek series, but we never did get around to that. So you're right. I mean, we have a ton of stuff we could find out more about the Breen going forward with Lower Decks and other Star Trek shows we have now. I'm talking to you, Section 31. Chris?
So while I think the arrival of these new drone ships is actually going to be bad news, but
Mhm.
I kind of like the fact that we get to see a new class of Starfleet ship and unmanned, because the last unmanned ship that we saw, I believe, was in the Voyager episode "Message in a Bottle," when the Doctor beams on board um, the ship that is being taken over by the Romulans. But we haven't really seen any unmanned ships, and there's we can talk about this a little bit more in the Gorn, but in today's society, there's so much talk about like the usage of drones. It just kind of made sense that when were we going to see like drone usage here?
Yeah. Well, just going back to that a second. Actually, the ship you meant was the Prometheus,
Mhm.
which is obviously the first of the Prometheus class. And actually, the Romulans had taken it over from a Starfleet crew that was testing it. And
Ah,
no, I'm sorry. They stole it out of Starbase. They'd somehow snuck into Starbase One on Earth and stole it, and were taking it to the Romulan Empire. I do remember that one, and that was a terrific episode, by the way. And yeah, I like that. I find it interesting that they've decided, okay, we're going to have this unmanned class of ship, and you're right, is that since um the end of Voyager and the '90s, um, you know, we've had two wars where well, several wars actually, where drone usage is very, very high. Um, Most recently with the Russians using unmanned aerial vehicles inside of Ukraine to carry out strikes, and you had to wonder, does Starfleet have something like this? And in fact, actually, um, another thing. I'm sorry, I'm going to diverge again here. In the movie Star Trek Into Darkness, um, Kirk had orders to bomb the Klingon homeworld Kronos from the other side of the neutral zone with long range torpedoes. And I thought, okay, that's very odd. That's like, firing smart bombs from a battleship, I guess. But yeah, it's like you wonder, okay, obviously post Dominion War and Borg conflicts, Starfleet is probably more wrapping up more ships along the idea of weapons development and less long-term exploration missions in which people can bring their families on board because they're going to be in deep space for 12 years. So obviously that's a thing. So probably they're thinking, just to save time and energy, why not just have a starship that we can control from a central command center somewhere that can protect Federation planets and also go on the offensive against the Borg without risking crew members being assimilated. Um, because you got to figure that's the big thing with the Borg. If they want to find out something, they just capture you and assimilate you, and then they know everything you know. So obviously, taking the biological aspect out of it is an advantage for a weapon like this. Um, so yeah, I mean it's very intriguing, but I also think it's interesting. It's like, okay, Lower Decks, we've got this California class ship. And now we've got the Texas class ship, and it was like, ugh, it's kind of going to be a conflict there. You could just tell.
So the other thing I think that was good about this episode, and it's good in a weird way, is I think Admiral Buenamigo, which is clearly not really a good friend of Carol's, um, I think he was using Operation Swingback, which is a good idea actually, because I
Mhm.
mean, you hear about first contact, and this is the first time through Lower Decks we've heard about second contact. But like, what's the sustainability? Like, if they don't join the Federation, like, what happens? So Operation Swingback was a good idea, but I think Buenamigo used this to highlight the introduction in a an effective way of the Texas class ships. I think he knew that the Breen had taken over on Brekar. And it was a setup to show, okay, the manned California class ship can't handle the Breen, but the unmanned Texas class, they can handle the situation. So I think Operation Swingback and Buen Amigo used this as there never really was an interest in Operation Swingback. There was an interest in showing off in a positive light their new Texas class ships.
I wish you were working in the writer's room, Chris, because I think that's a good point that they could really heighten in the next episode. Yeah, because I agree. Yeah, this is, obviously, I think the California class, particularly Cerritos, has been used throughout the series as a sacrificial lamb by Starfleet. I mean, just the way Carol was treated. If it wasn't for the fact that, okay, there were a bunch of Starfleet officers who didn't buy into the, this idea about the Pakled, that she blew up the Pakled home planet. She might have been the one who ended up at Starbase 80.
After what happened, I am wondering if she shouldn't be at Starbase 80.
Yeah, she might very well deserve it.
She could. I mean, she was portrayed in such a negative light, and she's probably so incensed at her crew that an ultimate result might be for her Starbase 80. And in light of recent events, I'm not sure if it wouldn't be undeserved.
I hate to say it because I do like Carol as a character. But yeah, there are times I think she, and I'm going to come to her defense here a little bit because I feel like there's something to be said about what she has to put up with and what, and a lot of women, especially African American women, have to put up when they're in a similar position that's usually reserved for white men, and that is they have to work twice as hard for less respect, less money, and they have to do a better job than their white male counterparts. And it is so infuriating that she puts all this pressure on herself and she puts all this pressure on Mariner to straighten up and act right. And she's suddenly realizing that no, this is not how it's supposed to be. I should, listen to my crew more. I should not be so worried about how people are perceiving me or anything, not worry about that because I'm just going to be judged anyway. So I might as well be judged as the best person I can be. And I think that's, one thing that, I think that's, part of the problem here. That said, yes, she should have maybe asked to see what Mariner said about her specifically and realized, oh, wait, she's not, but I don't think the reporter would have done that. I think the reporter was playing a gotcha thing and was just wanted some red meat to go after Carol, and just showing Mariner's interview was just like, okay, my attempt to be, quote, fair and balanced. Okay, there's one person, but she's your daughter. So of course we can't expect her to be unbiased. She's going to talk nice about you because she's your daughter. So, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think this is a good segment to go into the bad of the episode. And one thing that I thought was bad for the character development of Ransom was Ransom at this point has been sort of her CEO, monitoring her strictly to get her to be the ideal Starfleet officer. And according to the review we saw in the previous episode, he's been pretty much successful, right? And so when the time comes that he needed to step up and say, wait a minute, no, this is an overreaction. I've been overseeing her. Her performance reviews are excellent. This was the moment for him to stand up for his direct subordinate, and he took a pass. He sat down. He turned the other way. Ransom sort of stood up and said, no, wait a minute. Starbase 80, no. Put her in the brig temporarily, maybe. We need to calm down here and not just sit back and say, oh, okay, yeah, I think this is a good idea. From the moment that he was skulking around the corner and saw her talking and reported this to Captain Freeman, I mean, Ransom in this episode looks terrible. Not only from him like hitting on the reporter, turning in his own subordinate, and just standing to the side when he gets the worst possible punishment, which is being sent to Starbase 80. I mean, heel is not enough to describe how badly Ransom looks in this episode.
Yeah, Ransom, for me, he's a guy that always wants to be the next Will Riker or the next Jim Kirk, and he's not a backstabber, or anything. I don't want to give that. That's what I think of him. But yeah, he should have been more forceful. I think he tried to be, but he wasn't forceful enough. And I think that he just kind of did, he just went along with it, and he shouldn't have. And maybe he shouldn't have ratted her Mariner out in the first place.
Absolutely not. He should have
Yeah.
taken her to the side and said, "Listen, I saw you go in there. Before I talk to the captain, since you report directly to me, tell me what went on in there." That
Yeah.
was the proper chain of command, not going running to his captain and say, "Oh, like she did this," like trying to wash your hands, fearing that, okay, she did something terrible. I'm just going to do a Pontius Pilatus here and say, like, "Oh, not me." Ransom looks terrible in this episode.
Yeah, he does. And I hate to say it, but yeah, he really kind of sucked. And maybe he needs to go to Starbase 80 with Carol.
After seeing, I just want to say this, after seeing that rickety shuttle and those guys sent from Starbase 80, I wouldn't even send a certain someone from Star Trek Discovery to Starbase 80. That's how terrible it looks. Like, Book, even I'm not a fan of Book. Even I wouldn't send him to Starbase 80.
Oh my God.
The other person I think who looks terrible this episode is Jennifer. Like,
okay.
I've been Team Jennifer up until now, but now I am. Hold on a second. I've got to.
Folks.
I am turning around on Team Jennifer, and I am now Team Dump Jennifer. I mean,
okay.
How could she not stand by her? I mean, this was the moment that she had to step up because this was Mariner going to the one person, even when her close friends think, yeah, you are sort of loudmouth, you could have maybe done this. But this was the one moment that she had to go for that one person who would believe her. And instead, she's like, how could you do this to us? And, tries to hand her back the candle, which is kind of the symbol of that the relationship has ended. And Mariner does the right thing by saying, like, yeah, keep the stupid candle. So Jennifer, the one person who she needed to, like, believe in her, at least express some doubt. And she's like, yeah, you did this. Like, I am now Team Dump Jennifer.
Well, I'm sticking with Jennifer, but I think that Jennifer is going to have to do a lot more than make some candles and
a
really
lot more.
A lot more. So we're about to head into the Gorn, but before we do that, we want to thank our viewers for joining us today, and it's really appreciated. We hope you'll continue to come here, support us, and please remember to like and subscribe to Movers and Shakers Unlimited on our regular website and our YouTube site, and follow us on Facebook. We really do appreciate you and taking some time out of your Sunday morning to join us here as we talk about our favorite Star Trek shows. I think now is a good time to go into the Gorn. And Chris, if you don't mind, I have something really big I want to talk about concerning this episode that I thought about as we were getting ready. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I would like to show you all something very special and near and dear to my heart. This is my copy of Leonard Nimoy's I Am Spock that he wrote almost 30 years ago. This was his second autobiography. And in this book, he talks a lot about his first autobiography, which was called I Am Not Spock. The reason I'm bringing that up in this episode is we have all these perspectives where everybody prejudged Mariner before they actually knew what she said. And they all assumed this about her, and they threw her under the warp core and left her. And The story I'm talking about is when Leonard wrote his first autobiography, it was basically a book to talk about his life in and out of Star Trek, who he was, what he'd done, what Spock meant to him. And the reason he called it I Am Not Spock was because, when he was at an airport, to he was walking through the airport. This woman pointed him out to her son, and she said, "Honey, look, it's Mr. Spock." And the kid looked at him, and of course he's not wearing his Vulcan ears and stuff, and she says, "Oh, that's not Spock." And so he said, "Okay, I'm not Spock." And so he wrote that, and people automatically assumed, based on the title, that he did not like being Spock, that he felt stereotyped and typecast by that. And none of that was true. He loved Spock. It had opened up a whole world for him. He was never typecast. He went on to have tons of work throughout the rest of his career, not just as an actor in shows like Mission Impossible and Night Gallery, in hit movies like the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers and A Woman Named Golda, and of course came back to Star Trek in the animated series and the first 6 movies, directing 2 of them, directing numerous TV shows and other things. It had never hurt his career, and he never felt that it had. But because of the title he used for his first autobiography, people just assumed he hated it, and they went on assuming that for decades, and nothing could have been further than the truth. And as I thought about the episode, and I thought about Mariner, and everybody just prejudging her because, okay, yeah, she's a loudmouth. She talks bad about certain Starfleet regs that she thinks are stupid. She would not stab them in the back. She cares too much about the crew, and they didn't realize that in time. And they threw her under the bus, or threw her under the warp core, as I said, because of that. So, you can't, I guess in some cases, you can't judge a book by its title. You have to really understand what was in the person's heart when they wrote it. And in this case, they didn't even hear what she said. And what she said was how much she loved them. And they didn't realize it until it was too late. And now this family is broken, and they need to try to figure out how to pull themselves back together again. So, okay, Chris, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. You go ahead.
So it's the issue of perceptions, right? I mean, there's the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And here, clearly, the book has been judged by its cover. I mean, people tend to assign qualities to other people. And it's all about first perceptions, right? When you see someone, perhaps they're being loudmouth, you think, okay, they're just a loudmouth, without thinking of the context of like why they're being a loudmouth. And I know I'm dumping a little bit on Ransom, but his role is to kind of rein the captain back. So when Captain Freeman is making this judgment call based not on an ounce of fact, but it's just perception and fiction, he should have been one to say, listen, before we prejudge, maybe we need to actually listen to the episode, see what he has to say. But instead, there's the assumption made based on the perception, oh, this is just her, right? She's just gone off again. And so he gets punished for something that he never should have to begin with. And instead, this is a consequence of the captain's actions of trying to be someone she is not. As we saw in the dream episode when you had like with the eggs being broken and you see your own worst nightmares. I mean, the crew from the other California ship, they tell the lower deckers, hey, listen, you guys are like the Enterprise of California class. I mean, everything that you do, it's like admired. And so this is who they are. But because of the presence of one reporter and Captain Freeman's fragile ego, she tries to be something different. And it absolutely fails and blows up in her face. I mean, the people who actually believe in the Cerritos are the lower deckers. But yet she does everything she can to like push them to the side, to only put in front of the press the or hand-picked officers that she thinks, oh, these people are the ones who are going to say like great things about me and the ship, and they clearly don't. And she tries to control the narrative and be something she isn't, and just fails spectacularly, and fails to the degree that she has quite possibly even lost her daughter. I mean, it's an epic fail of like incredible proportions, based on not only perceptions of someone, but trying to be someone who you clearly are not.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why we, you've got. I think this is another great point about the titles of trusted sources. Okay, if you cannot trust your own daughter and you cannot trust your own abilities, who can you trust? And clearly, it's not certain people on that crew that they're going to just badmouth you anyway because okay, they don't want to be there. They think they deserve to be on the Enterprise or on Voyager or something, doing something cool. And yet they're on this rickety California class just doing these follow up missions. Um, and the thing is, you're right. I mean, Mariner, Boimler, Tindy, and Rutherford believe in the Cerritos. They love the Cerritos. It's their ship, and they take a lot of personal pride in it. It's just, hey, Mariner is like super smart, and super smart people don't do well when they get stuck in mediocre jobs. So, I wish there was just a way Carol could just put her in a job where she's doing xenobiology and xenohistory stuff that she's really good at and let her excel at that and stop bogging her down, and treating her like it's a punishment because clearly Mariner, wants to on some level does want to make her proud, but at the same time there's certain things about Starfleet that just aggravate her and maybe Carol needs to listen to her a little bit more about that. And it's like, okay, what do you suggest, Mariner, that we do about this? Because I think that a sign of good management sometimes is, okay, when somebody comes in and expresses a problem to the boss, okay, how do we change that? And, but I don't, I think you're right. I think Carol does have a fragile ego and she doesn't always, she just can't trust herself. And yet she's a pretty good captain, I think. I mean, last year's season finale where they rescued the Sovereign class starship from crashing into that planet was really a great, really good show of her leadership. She just needs to be more like that captain.
I mean,
Uh,
who you are is what makes you special. And we saw her leadership in the final episode of last season. Like, that's who she is. That's who she sort of continued to be for this episode. And,
yeah,
you know, clearly she wasn't. Also, the other thing I thought very interesting, and after this, I think it's a, I want to touch on something else, but when I'm a big fan of the Next Generation, okay, but it was sort of a simplistic idea. It's like, okay, let's have the entire civilization go cold turkey and just take off. And so I thought the mural was an excellent visual to show like they left them in a really bad state. I mean, they of course totally freaked out. Yeah, maybe they've traded their addiction to drugs and addiction to physical fitness, but I love that mural because there really was a lack of follow through and like we're cutting them off and just leaving them. I mean, that's not a treatment. That's like sweeping under the rug. I mean, there needs to be a phase of treatment to get people from A to C. And so I'm glad that they addressed this because it was sort of like, okay, we're just going to leave and go on and things are going to be fine. And so I'm very glad they actually showed us that mural because addiction doesn't work like, okay, we're just going to cut things off and things are going to be great.
yeah. Well, I too am a huge fan of the Next Generation. I agree with everything you just said. And I just want to follow up by saying, say no to drugs is not a treatment plan. Okay, it is not a solution to the problem. It's a medical problem.
Well said.
And yes, and if I recall from that episode, Beverly did suggest to Jean Luc, "Hey, I could go in there and I could come up with a treatment program to help these people out." And Picard's like, "No, no, we're just gonna let them go cold turkey because Prime Directive and stuff." And I think that was overly simplistic. I'm very glad that they followed through with that because as much as you and I might admire Jean-Luc Picard and think he was a great captain, yeah, this is one time that, I don't think he really did the right thing. But of course, we're talking about, there's been about a almost 40-year difference here because, okay, there was what we knew in the 80s versus what we know now in 2022. And what we know now in 2022 is probably a little bit more accurate than what we knew back then. That drugs are not just not a moral or criminal problem; they're a health problem, and you know they should be treated as such. And I think that was really good. Yeah, it's a nice shot across the bow. It's like, yeah, hey, this, we went through hell for 10 years, and maybe we didn't need to go through hell for 10 years, but hey, we did come out okay on the other side. So we don't need you guys. Just take off.
Yeah.
Just go back to your ship and get the hell out of here. Okay.
Yeah.
We got push-ups to do. We're running a marathon.
So, Josh, one thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
This whole thing with the new Texas class ships showing up in the nick of time. I think this was all a setup. I think that there never really was any honest thought put into Operation Swingback. Though again, I think it's a great idea. They just chose the Cerritos because they knew that the Breen was on Brekar, and a situation would be created in which the California class would be totally overmatched by the Breen, and then they could swoop in for the rescue while a reporter was there. So all of a sudden, the story moves from Operation Swingback being a good idea to like, oh, these unmanned drones that can respond instantly are a great idea. So I think Buenamigo was no good friend, and that this was all a setup.
I agree. I think Point Amigo definitely set him up. I think that I think they definitely had to have known somehow. Yeah, the Breen were definitely in that sector, and I absolutely agree that yeah, this was an opportunity for us to test them out this new class of crewless starship. Um,
My follow up to
and
the and my
yeah,
follow up for you is: do you think Admiral Buendia is Section 31?
I think so. Yeah, I think he at least has one foot in Section 31. I think most of the Admiralty, from if you go back to Deep Space Nine and Admiral Ross, they know about Section 31. They do turn to them sometimes because they need to take the quote quick and easy path to protect the Federation at all costs. So I think that was definitely something. I think the fact that they sent in this drone ship to save the Cerritos and take out the Breen was something that, yeah, they definitely wanted to use. And I think Cerritos, I think I said this before, Cerritos has been treated like the sacrificial goat of so much of this that it's like, yeah, we need to test out this new weapon system. Send the Cerritos. We need, a backup ship to, make the Sovereign class look good. Send the Cerritos. Yeah, and no wonder the other California class ships admire them because, yeah, they're going out there and they're doing this hard work and, managing to pull it off, even though they don't have anywhere near the resources that the rest of that other ships have. But yeah, they know they're getting second class to the big ships, and I think this is one of these times that that definitely happened in this episode.
I mean, they're definitely punching over their weight.
Yeah, they are, and I think sometimes it's worked, and sometimes it's not been without casualties. So I think Carol, she's getting screwed over by people she thinks are her friends, and then she's messing over people that really are concerned about her. And I think next season she's going to have to really reevaluate that I mean, who really is my friends, who do I really trust, and what should I really be doing with my career. I think are important. I don't even think her husband even has her best interests at heart. I mean,
They're
I think he condescends to her. I think he kind of looks down on her a little bit. I know that's harsh, but I'm beginning to think that a lot. That this poor woman is just taking a lot of undue crap and then getting angry at the people she shouldn't be getting angry at.
So he's
Yeah.
definitely lashing out. Um, so, Josh, I think it's time to move on to some predictions of like what we expect next in the season finale, and maybe some hints for the next season.
Yes.
Do you want to go first?
Okay. I'm okay. I think this is the most obvious prediction. I predict that the Texas class ships are going to get hacked by, wait for it, Peanut Hamper and Jeffrey Combs's AI character, whose name
Agamas.
Agamus. Thank you, Mr. Agamus, and Peanut Hammer are going to hack the Texas class, turn them against the Federation, and I think the Cerritos is going to be caught in the middle of it. I think there's a very good possibility that somehow, um, somehow Mariner is going to come in there and help everybody out, and everybody's going to be very. Hopefully, everyone will be very grateful to her and want her to take her back. But maybe she might be feeling like, maybe I need to kind of move on. But that's kind of my big prediction for our next episode. And then going into season 4, maybe season 4 will be more about Mariner trying to come, wanting, deciding, do I want to be a freelance archaeologist doing questionable things, or should I still be in Starfleet, which has been my home? Chris?
I am in complete agreement with you that I think things are being set up so that at the end of this season, and I think it may go into next season, that um, Peanut Hamper and Agamas are going to team up and they're going to take over those drones. And the drones are going to become a significant threat to the Federation because, as we've seen, they pack a lot of punch. And how could they not? Life support and other systems like that they don't need it. They can just, send all that to weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
So, complete agreement with you there. The other thing I think is that we will find out that the shadowy figure overseeing what happened to Rutherford will be Admiral Buenamigo. Um, because I
Mm-hmm.
think the name is a red herring, because in Spanish, Buenamigos means good friend. And Section 31 is the opposite of your good friend. And what was done to Rutherford had to be overseen, or at least it seems implied, by someone in a higher up authority who was very concerned, possibly for his own career, for Rutherford not remembering who he was and what was done. And experimental engines, that could be a component of an unmanned drone program. I think we will find out at the end of this episode that it's Buenamigo who's actually quite possibly even the head of Section 31.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. That Buen Amigo is you know working behind the scenes, and as we've seen with Section 31, you tend to get some very questionable things, and it does tend to backfire. And I mean, it has, and I could go on for hours and hours about screw ups about real life intelligence organizations in the real world, going in with certain intentions and then completely screwing them up. And I think this is going to be one of those times. So um, I think in that case, I think William Boimler might find himself being the head of Section 31 if Buenamigo goes down hard, which Section 31 always seems to find a way to resurrect itself. It's like Hydra.
It
It's
is
not,
like
yeah.
cut off one Starfleet head, two more emerge. I also, I also think that Mariner and Petra are going to be a thing going into next season, as in not a thing as in the way Jennifer was, but I think they're going to be it's going to be a partnership where I agree with you. She's not returning, I think, immediately to Starfleet. I mean, maybe
No.
at the start of next season, but I think her being outside of Starfleet, she will be successful and she may return, but it's not going to be at the end of the season finale. I think this is going to extend into like the next season.
Yeah, I think it's a safe bet. And once again, I'd like to thank our viewers as we prepare to wrap up the episode today. Thank you all again for joining us today. And please do remember to like, share, and subscribe on Movers and Shakers on our YouTube channel, our main website, and our Facebook page. So, and I think we'll wrap this up. Chris, can you want to tell our fans where to find you?
Yes, indeed, Josh. Shout out to Baltimore Comic Con, which is happening next week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you're an attendee and you see someone walking around on Saturday dressed as Dick Tracy, just look for the large yellow coat. I am not the man in the yellow hat, just to be clear. Come by and say hello. I'll be there. I'll be taking lots of pictures of cosplay to feature on my gram, Verde Cosplay. And feel free to say hi. Hope to see as many of you as I can at Baltimore Comic Con.
Yep. And I am, as always, Josh Pritchett, and you can find me on my Facebook page, Josh Pritchett Jr. Also at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup page on meetup.org, and also on its page on Facebook. And my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, is still on sale at Amazon and on Kindle. And until next week, I am Josh Pritchett.
Peace and long life.
Thanks, bye. Thanks, everybody.